to this session of, learning for sustainability in terms of our actions, to support museums, learning provision and teaching and learning in the classroom of young people and their actions to support climate, agenda. We have three guest speakers here today. We have presentations from Scott Deck, from our guest speaker, Scott Deck, and also from Case Museum and Garden, and the Miners in Dundee. They will talk to us, about their Wild Escape project that you did last year for the biodiversity on the Earth Day. So the Wild Escape, was funded by Art Fund, in partnership, with and that was, useful, at that time. I think it's time to look back on that and then use that to support our own, what we'll be doing in terms of support for this area of work. It's an important area of work. Everybody's on. We all have to do a bit about, climate or environment and all of that in terms of now and for new generations to come. I will be, open discussions around this topic, and I have sent in the agenda the questions to help us stimulate our discussions. Please note that even though I put there something like Jamboard, I only remembered this morning that Jamboard is no more, so we're not going to be using Jamboard. However, we will be expecting you to discuss in your teams, in your groups, and then, get somebody to actually take notes and, if possible, put that on chat, and we'll capture all of that in order to send that back to everybody attending today. Just to say, we're recording this session. We will be recording the presentation side of things, and we won't be recording the discussions. So for the presentation, if you don't want your face to show in the recording online, then you feel free to actually switch your camera off. But we will require you, and we want you to leave your camera open if you can during your discussion session, because it's always nice, to see yourselves and connect with others in the room. We won't be recording that. However, we'll be taking notes of, whatever comes out to share that afterwards. After that, we will look at feedback, and then, we have our climate officer, Lucy Neville, is in the room, who is going to be telling you all about how MGS can support, all your work around climate actions and how you support teaching and learning in schools, but by working collaboratively, with other partners. You cannot do this on your own. So unless anybody else, want to say things, on this, I think without further ado, all I know is that I haven't put, a break session or for us to have a break. However, I will say feel free to actually get up and make yourself a cup of tea or try and, relax. It's always, something you can come to. But I think we have 2 hours for this session. It could have taken longer, but we'll try and be as effective as we can and efficient in the use of, the timing we have. So without much further ado, I'm going to call our guest speaker, Charlotte Dwyer, who is the director of Scott Deck, to come and give us, the way Scott Deck, look at, and support climate actions and sustainability in line with also supporting teaching and learning of young people in terms of engagement with schools. Welcome, Charlotte.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be with you all this morning. So my name is Charlotte Dwyer, and I work for Scott Deck. Scott Deck is a global citizenship centre, and we are based in Edinburgh. And our work, a lot of our work is with schools and educators, and we work through delivering global citizenship education, but really we work to support and enable capacity in educators to deliver global citizenship. So we work a lot with teachers, early years practitioners, and youth workers as well. And we do that. We provide training for teachers and for schools, and we also develop quite a lot of resources. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to share our kind of approach, what we mean by global citizenship, and then I'm going to show what that looks like if we're teaching around climate change and the climate emergency. And please do feel free to, I'm not entirely sure of everyone in the room and what their knowledge and background is. So if you want to add things or put your hand up and ask questions, then please feel free to join in, and we'll make use of the chat as well if you want to. So I suppose, first of all, I just wanted to, I'm sure everyone is familiar with this, but I just wanted to put the context of our work within the frame of learning for sustainability. So this is where most of our work with schools and young people is situated. I quite like this sketch note that Education Scotland produced quite recently, because I think it really speaks to the breadth and the depth of learning for sustainability. So this is really about approach to life and learning, which enables learners and educators and schools and their wider communities to kind of build a socially just, sustainable and equitable. So obviously climate change is part of that, but it's also much broader. So the kind of strands within that are outdoor learning, sustainable development, but also global citizenship. And I'm really going to focus on the global citizenship part today, because that is really informs our approach. So what is global citizenship? It's usually, global citizenship is probably much broader than most people think. It's not about learning about people in other places. It is about learning about how we are connected locally through global issues, and how things that we do in our own lives here have impacts on other people. It's about recognizing the responsibilities that we have through these connections, both locally and globally, and thinking about not only those responsibilities to humanity, but also those responsibilities to the planet. So this is taken from Ideas, which is our network organization. But I thought it might be helpful to kind of drill down a little bit more into thinking about what this approach looks like. So it's about knowledge and skills, but it's really also about bringing diverse voices and perspectives into what we're learning, whatever we're learning. That we're not just presenting a single voice or a single narrative, that we're also always looking to ensure that diverse voices are heard. We also try and really connect things to real life context. And as I said at the beginning, if we're looking at climate, then thinking about what are the really local connections. You think about the learner, the individual school environment, class environment. What are the things which are real for them that we can connect to the issue, so that they can start to understand how it is important to them as well as to their communities in the wider world? Because I think quite often some of these global issues that we want to explore with learners can feel very distant and something that they're not part of. So we always want to start with the learner and make them. We also want to take into account, historic injustices, history, things that have shaped where we are today, the inequalities that we have today. But ultimately, it's also about thinking about the future and inspiring hope and motivation and encouraging people to take action. And I think this is something very important also when we're talking about global issues in the climate emergency, that it can sometimes feel it's all doom and gloom. We can feel powerless within that. And a really important aspect of global citizenship is this idea of creative, critical thinking, which inspires hope. And we really want to, when we work with teachers, we really want to enable them to support their children and young people they work with to develop agency. And even if it's just taking a really tiny action within their own school environment, it can give them a sense that they aren't powerless, but they have the agency to do something and affect change. So that's kind of our approach. And I wanted also just here to think about how to demonstrate the kind of the breadth of global citizenship. And this is, so our work in ScotDec, it's connected to learning for sustainability. And we have a strong thread of social justice running through it, which means that also in turn informs our approach to how we might teach about the climate emergency. In fact, we probably would use the term climate justice, but, and I'm going to come back to that. Another important strand of our work, which also connects with global citizenship, is anti-racist education. And ScotDec has been working with Education Scotland, part of the design team for the Building Racial Literacy programme, and we facilitate on that. And we've also currently been commissioned by them to create a suite of anti-racist education materials to support early level health and well-being across levels 1 to 3. And then we're also now starting on an English and literacy resource. And some of you will be familiar with the anti-racist curriculum principles, and within that they talk quite a lot about global citizenship. So for us, global citizenship kind of sits in the middle between learning for sustainability, equalities, anti-racist education, and kind of brings them all together through the kind of lenses that we use when we're developing our professional learning or we're developing our education materials, and the kind of approach that we support teachers and other educators to do in the classroom. So I wanted to think next then about what does it mean if we bring these lenses to the climate emergency? And I suppose for us, it would mean it enables learners to explore issues from multiple perspectives, to form their own viewpoints, and then to reflect on what actions they can take in relation to the climate. It also means that we talk quite a lot about climate justice, and that idea about it's about how this understanding that those who least contributed to cause climate breakdown are the ones who suffer the most from those effects. So I think that is a lens that we use mainly when we're approaching this topic, and I think that means that we obviously we don't tend to focus on the science. We're not saying it's not important that children and young people aren't taught about the science of climate change, but we tend to focus on the climate justice side. You know, ideally, all these things would be brought. It can become a very kind of local expression of learning about the climate emergency without I suppose that also means thinking about the intersectionality that underpins that, and I'll come on to say a little bit more about that in a minute. I suppose the thing also which is very important for us is thinking about how we centre children's voices within this, and how, again, as I spoke at the beginning, these issues can seem very big, they can be very complicated. The kind of whole concept of climate justice can feel very complex. So I wanted to share this video with you, which was made by primary school children exploring climate justice. So probably not going to show all of it, but I am going to show a little bit of this because I think it demonstrates the importance of this approach. It demonstrates how even quite young children are able to understand these issues, and also it demonstrates the kinds of actions that children can make. So they made this video, which has been quite widely shared across Scotland and used in lots of different classrooms and with lots of children in order to kind of extend their learning around this topic. So hopefully you can hear this. So Loretta, maybe shout if you can't. Just loading up just now.
Climate justice. Climate justice is about people. Climate justice is understanding that climate change is already hurting people. Climate justice means understanding that climate change affects some people more than others. Climate justice is understanding that those who did the least to cause climate change are suffering the most. Climate justice means helping people to cope with climate change. Climate justice is planting more trees so children can breathe clean air. Climate justice means everyone has a safe home to live in. Climate justice is making sure that everyone, everywhere, has healthy food to eat. Climate justice is making sure everyone has clean water to drink. Climate justice means ending racism. Climate justice is letting children play, not worry. Climate justice is making clean energy affordable for everyone, everywhere. Climate justice means everyone has a safe house to live in. Climate justice means making it easier for people to recycle. Climate justice means making it easier for people to make green choices. Climate justice is fewer cars.
Okay, I'm just gonna leave it there. I think it gives you oops, sorry. I'm going to get on to my next slide. Sorry, I think I need to go out and reshare the PowerPoint. So I wanted to show you that because I think it gives you lots of different examples of what we mean by the term climate justice. And I think really importantly, it also shows some of the kind of breadth of what we mean by climate justice. And I particularly liked the point that the children made about having safe homes. Sorry, I'm getting into a loop here. Sorry. I wanted it to open on this slide. Okay. I think because it showed how racism, it showed how having a safe place to live, having clean air, how all these things are really intimately connected. And I think I love the simplicity of the video because it gets across those ideas in a very clear message, even to very young children. So just highlighting that idea of what we mean by climate justice and how the kind of intersections of climate justice with other aspects of life. So the racial justice, looking at some of the historical colonial roots that have created the conditions that we have that's causing climate change. Thinking about how it is Black and people of colour who are much more likely to be impacted by climate change, whether it is, sub-Saharan Africa or living in communities in the global north. Looking at how it connects with gender issues, and again, how it's women who are much more likely to be impacted by the impacts of climate change. And also just the idea of intergenerational justice, and about, we talk a lot about, preserving what we've got for future generations, but thinking about how do we invite all these voices into the room when we're talking about these issues. We should have the young people at the table. We should make sure that we have people of colour at the table. We should have women at the table. And again, it's just making sure that if we're creating something and working with learners, that we're mindful of whose voices are in the room and whose we're listening to, and encourage them to find their voices as children to talk about the issues, but at the same time being mindful of children's rights, that it's not their responsibility to deal with climate change. This is just a summary slide of climate justice that comes from a recent report. And I suppose, again, I wanted to this kind of underpins our approach, but then to think also about the idea it's not about telling learners what to think and do about the climate emergency, but it's about providing stimulus for critical thinking, for debate, and then thinking about actions that they want to do. So some of it is about developing skills so that they can think critically about the issues, but also the skills that they might need to take actions, making sure that they have a whole understanding of the approach, thinking about the historical legacies, thinking about those inequalities, and sometimes that can be missing from some of the materials that the children and teachers are working with. So it's just ensuring that this kind of multifaceted, different perspectives around the issue for our children and young people. So one of the things that we at ScotDeck have talked about quite a lot is this idea of critical hope. And we've made a resource that looks at how we can combat climate anxiety. And we know that lots of children and young people can feel quite anxious about this issue. They can feel quite powerless about this issue. So we have been exploring ways that we can provide, a positive message, but at the same time, a kind of realistic message about what needs to happen. But one of the things that we think about, and it's informed by global citizenship approaches, is that idea of thinking small, thinking within the sense of agency by being able to actually do something, giving them an opportunity to respond and develop something locally in response to some of these issues. How am I doing for time, Loretta? Have I got? Oh, I can't. You're on mute. Sorry.
On mute. Sorry. You're just dead on, but and you are now approaching into your Q&A. Oh, please.
Okay. So I'll just go through the last bits quickly then. So I did want to this is the resource that we've produced most recently about tackling climate anxiety. I did want to show some of the clips. It's a video resource. We've got extracts from young people talking about how they feel about climate change and what some of the things that have helped them overcome some of the anxieties they've had around it. And we also have someone from the Children's Parliament talking about a children's rights approach. So I do really recommend having a look at that, because particularly Sophia talking about framing this issue as a children's rights issue, I found really, really valuable. So I did want to share that with you today. So I hope you have a chance to look at that afterwards. I wanted to talk about some of the methodologies that we use. I think, as I mentioned, we talked about developing critical thinking approaches. So something like an agree-disagree line, where you provide a statement and you ask learners to think about whether they agree or disagree with the statement that you got there, and then helping children see that you don't have to have a black and white response to something, that you can have shades of grey in between. This is quite a good activity for doing that. It's an activity some of you might already be familiar with. I use an issues tree quite a lot. Again, it's a very good technique for exploring a climate emergency with children and young people. The idea would be that you look at the causes of climate change in the roots, the effects in the branches, and then some of the solutions can be fruits and apples or leaves or whatever what you want in the trees. If it's really good for getting them to understand the cause, effect, and the solution, and if they want to take actions, thinking about how their actions are related to the causes underneath. Another really good resource which I wanted to highlight, which was developed in partnership with ScotDeck, our sister organisation WASDEC in Glasgow, and the Third Generation Project at St Andrews University, is, as I say, it's a human rights-based approach to exploring climate justice. And again, I think it doesn't look at the science; it looks at the impacts on people. There's case studies in Scotland and there's case studies in Somaliland, and looking about the impacts they've had, and it looks a lot at what young people have done in response to some of those things. So it takes that kind of human rights frame in looking at this issue as well. Other resources that ScotDeck has produced quite a lot of resources. They're not all climate related. But you might want to go onto our website and have a look at those, and you'll certainly find the ones I've flagged up today on there. I also wanted to flag up a couple of other resources. We have a global citizenship magazine for schools, which comes out 4 times a year. And if the stories or projects or resources that linking to some of these, we would be really like to get in touch, and you can potentially have an article or share some of the things that are going on within that. Also, we have a signpost, which site for educators in Scotland. We have a series within that, one of those useful resources. And again, if you're developing new materials and resources for schools in Scotland, then please do send them to us, because we can potentially add this to this website, because it's basically a repository of all the different resources that have been gathered around global citizenship issues. So we'd be happy to share other people's materials in there. And finally, just to finish off, to say that the ScotDec, we're a small organisation, and we work in partnership with lots of other organisations. One of our most recent very popular resources, not to do with the climate emergency, but to do with kind of Scottish cultural heritage and identity, we developed in partnership with the Scottish National Library. And we are always open if you want to work with teachers, if you want to develop professional learning or develop resources, then we're very open to working with other people and working in partnership. So thank you very much for having me along today. I'm sorry for going over time. A lot to say.
Stop sharing. Well, thank you very much, Charlotte. That was, very important, very useful, and it's really exciting. Folks, we're not just going to do the Q&A right now. I think what we'll do, as we're running out over in kind of time, we can bring in the case studies immediately, and then we'll leave keep your questions there, and then after the case studies, we can ask, the presenters, those questions before we go into the breakout room. If that is okay by you guys, I think let's do it that way. So thank you very much, for that exciting, presentation indeed. Beyond thing, I think for me, it's about the climate action, climate change is also climate, social justice, issue, which is, amazing, and it's globally human rights-based approach towards that. Well, I'll now ask, St. Andrews Museum, St. Andrews, and I have to get it right, St. Andrews Heritage Museum and Garden to present, on their initiative last year to support, climate change, but also environmental, biodiversity and environmental awareness issues around climate change. That was done last year and launched on Earth Day. And so please welcome Asap Ahmad and Sam Walker from the museums. It's over to you, Asap and Sam.
Thanks very much, Loretta. I think Asap's going to be sharing the slides for our presentation. And thanks very much for inviting us to the session. And that was really great to hear from Charlotte. Those resources look really interesting. I've not seen them before, so really keen to explore them further as well. So thank you. So today we're just going to be talking about the Green Creators project that we had at the museum last year in 2023, springtime 2023. And that was part of the Wild Escape Fund that we managed to secure funding from. And the project was really, what we're going to look at is its impact on engaging younger audiences with nature. So I'm just going to start off with talking about the broader context of the project within the wider plans for the museum that are currently taking place. And then Asap will actually talk more about the project itself. So we'll just go on to the next slide. So this project is actually part of our much wider National Lottery Heritage Fund redevelopment project. And the Wild Escape project was part of our development, phase. And it really provided us with an opportunity to pilot some activities on themes that we hadn't really engaged with before, with priority audiences that we had identified that we weren't engaging with through the redevelopment. So that was really the background to why we were looking at doing that. In terms of the wider redevelopment project, sustainability for us is one of our key aims. It's integral to the redevelopment. It covers everything that we're doing. We're really trying to take a holistic approach to this. So there's physical interventions that we're looking at doing, through the capital works, but also through our activities. And ASAB's going to be speaking a bit more to that. So in terms of the capital build, I'll just quickly cover that. It really looks at implementing specific measures on our site, including insulation of our roof. You could feel the wind coming through the roof on a day like today. So also looking at sustainable materials, so things like reclaimed pan tiles being used rather than new. Looking at sustainable materials for the actual installation itself and using locally sourced materials. Also, we are planning a new build, which is just what you can see at the bottom there within our garden space. So trying to make that sustainable and lessen the impact on our environment through things like solar panels, an air source heat pump, and also having a living roof on that space. And then looking beyond those kind of capital elements, how do we incorporate some of these environmental themes into our interpretation? So we have a really nice garden space where we can do that, but also within some of the permanent exhibitions too. We're identifying opportunities to bring those themes in across the museum. So the focus today, though, is on the activities on this specific project and what we've learnt from that, and how we're moving forward. So I'll pass it on to ASAB, who will talk in more detail about that. But thank you.
Hi, I'll just be talking specifically about what we did in terms of the Wild Escape project. Our sort of contribution to the project was specifically tied to the context of our spring exhibition last year in 2023, which was titled Green Spaces Through an Artistic Lens. And what that exhibition was really looking at was how the natural surroundings had inspired and been interpreted by local artists, explored through sort of artwork in our collections, specifically within a localized context. So we had sort of a range of different artworks from our collections, as well as some on loan, as well as various photographs of sort of green spaces around St Andrews, as well as sort of providing interpretation on sort of wider themes of how these natural surroundings could have been sort of damaged by environmental change, climate change, and sort of suffer sort of threats like that. So, for example, we looked at kind of potential effects of sea level rise in St Andrews specifically through looking at various projected maps, and also looking at photographs of sea level sort of environmental damage in St Andrews in the past, as well as sort of defining several sort of key terms around sort of biodiversity, climate change, sustainability, and the like. The Wild Escape funding really gave us an opportunity for engaging younger audiences in terms of our exhibition, particularly. We thought this was a great opportunity to reestablish a relationship with sort of schools and organizations which we'd had links with in the past, but which had sort of not been sustained as a recurring relationship, and really tied this to the environmental themes being explored within the exhibition. And the way we were wanting to do this was sort of through a very tactile and sort of creative connection to nature, in terms of doing activities such as that to establish a positive sort of connection and relationship with nature, and then tying that into the localized context to sort of develop a wider awareness of environmental or threats to the local environment, and encouraging kind of positive climate action through that. We'd initially planned on engaging 90 participants, as sort of a kind of tangible objective, and also having a generally carbon footprint for all our activities associated with the project. So in terms of the actual activities, we had 4 plant printing sessions in total, and these were done with a Fife-based artist, Tina Scopa, um, whose work is tied heavily to biodiversity and involves a very sort of specific plant printing technique involving sort of plants and sort of spoons in order to press the plant out and create an imprint on paper. Which is made great use of the sort of resources we had with the museum garden, as well as providing an immediate sort of result, which was sort of immediately gratifying for the participants and presented a positive tactile connection. Two of the sessions were drop-in sessions at the museum, so people could book in advance or drop in throughout the session. Whereas 2 were planned with specific groups. So one was planned with Families First, which is a local organization in St Andrews and Fife, which works with families who require additional support needs. And one of them was a visit out to Largo Ward Primary School. As they didn't have the transport to come to the museum, we decided to go out to them for a session. And during the sessions, I would try and sort of present kind of activities to tie the plant printing in with broader environmental concepts, specifically through looking at the artworks in the collections and using that to explore themes of biodiversity and sustainability and climate change. We also had an Earth Day event planned. This was initially planned to be done with Families First as a follow-up event from the plant printing session and produce a sort of collaborative artwork that looked specifically into sort of or represented kind of broader thoughts around climate action that the younger audiences would have when they had done the plant printing session, and they're sort of moving forward in engaging with wider themes. But unfortunately, the plan sort of fell through because they had sort of scheduling clashes and couldn't make it. So we kind of redid the event so that it would be for families to sort of drop in and produce collaborative and creative artworks. And also there was storytelling sort of on environmental themes done by a local storyteller, Sheila Kinninmonth. We also had an art cart that was produced to the funding, and this was sort of quite a major output. And this was produced by a local artist, Lyle McCants, sort of made using non-hazardous paints, locally sourced materials. And this housed all our sort of various arts and crafts kind of materials and resources. And so there was environmentally themed carvings and prompts on the art card. And this was where the majority of the funding went. And this has had a very sort of effective impact long term in terms of engagement with younger audiences for us, both during the exhibition and extended onwards as well. So I'll just briefly talk about the outcomes. So we used a couple different evaluation methods. One of them was a carbon calculator to calculate the emissions of our activities. There was a survey as part of the Wildscape, which we sent out, which was sort of more for teachers and practitioners and the like. But the sort of the feedback from that actually went directly to the audience agency. So we didn't have direct access to that. But one of the lessons learned from that already, I suppose, was a more robust evaluation procedure for us. And also we sort of generally gauged the outcomes through participant numbers and general kind of observation during the activities, and also talking to sort of the practitioners and sort of people supervising involved as well. So in terms of a few of the successes, we sort of successfully reestablished some sort of long-term relationships with Families First and Largo Ward, which went forward and allowed us to continue engaging diverse priority audiences. And this, in terms of Families First, this included audiences with additional support needs, who we had not had a regular engagement before in the past. We also had a long-term use of the art card, which was very successful both during the exhibition and was a big draw in terms of visitor retention and engagement with the themes of the exhibition beyond just simply kind of looking at the artwork. And during the exhibition itself, we had 2,000 visitors in 9 weeks, and the art cart was certainly a big part of that as a draw. And we also had a relatively low carbon footprint for sort of all the activities combined, which was 80 kilograms of CO2 emissions. Although I may not be the most advanced at inputting all the data for that, so I'm not sure how accurate that figure is, but that's an approximation according to the carbon calculator we'd used. We had a sort of a variety of quite difficult challenges to overcome. We sort of had to shift our kind of objectives and the activities from, so we planned to do the plant printing workshops sort of all with schools and organizations specifically sort of ahead of time, except a lot of schools we'd initially contacted, that contact didn't sort of result in a workshop, particularly with the Easter holidays being around that time, resulting in difficulties. A lot of the people who we'd initially had relationships, a lot of the personnel had changed in schools and organizations, so we'd lost that working relationship we'd developed. And as a result, that sort of adversely affected target numbers. So we didn't receive the 90 participants. We got around 53 participants instead. So a reduction from our initial target objective for sure. And part of that was because having changed things to drop-in sessions. We also had some sort of interference during sessions by kind of teachers and supervisors, which was well-meaning but wasn't necessarily appreciated by the practitioners in charge of the sessions, for example. And there was definitely a difficulty with sort of the higher level concepts in terms of communicating that effectively, and sort of resulting in sort of taking that forward with longer term impact, and climate action for the audiences. So I'll just very quickly run through the lessons learned. So one of them was sort of trying to communicate the kind of higher level concepts at a more accessible level. And it's been sort of good to see the presentation from ScotDec actually today, because that gives us some more ideas of how to do that effectively. And sort of we found the most success we had was with kind of the simple tactile activities, and perhaps something that we thought that would be more in line with that, taking that forward and doing some follow-up activities to connect those themes in further in relation to the tactile activities would perhaps be more effective. We've also found since that charging a nominal fee for sort of drop-in sessions and activities is actually more effective in ensuring that people don't sort of decide not to show up last minute if the weather's bad or something like that. So even if it is a relatively small fee, it certainly has actually helped in sort of maintaining or sort of increasing numbers for activities. And a lot of the sort of things we found successful in terms of engaging sort of children, pupils with the tactile activities, we have implemented into our interpretation plan for the museum redevelopment, which will look to sort of, I'll use a lot of these tactile strategies to engage specifically with themes of sustainability, and biodiversity and sort of environmental themes within our redevelopment project specifically. And that will also follow up and be led into the activity plan of engaging with sort of schools and younger audiences through workshops and activities as well. So that sort of brings us to the end of the presentation. And yeah, thank you very much for listening. I'll stop sharing the screen now.
Thank you very much, Asaph. But it's lovely to hear this, green creators and green creators and engaging audiences with nature. Your project, looks, fantastic in terms of, you don't really need to break the banks, before you get, to do the things you want to do to support, climate actions. And it's great to hear about the lessons learned. We'll be talking about that more in the discussion group today, but let's keep those questions, with us, and let's we're still running out of time, but I'm sure we'll regain, about 5 minutes. So I'm now going, thank you very much. I will now call the McManus to give us their presentation on their wild escape at the McManus. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's been really nice to hear these presentations. There are lots of great projects being delivered. Ours is not as long a presentation. That's maybe a good thing, Loretta, because you're running out of time a little bit. So our involvement was through the Wild Escapes Fund again, and we had a real celebration delivering this. It was a real joy and gift to us because here at the museum we've got a really large natural history collection, and sometimes we're kind of way off delivering other things, and it falls in the background, and we never get enough time to celebrate it and really develop our own kind of STEM learning skills and things. So with this fund, we developed an eco school and a Wild Escapes at the McManus World Earth Day celebration. And we targeted lots of different audiences, New Scots families and some Ukrainian families that we've been working with. It was a real experience, a kind of experiential week, I suppose. Next slide, sorry. So throughout the summer school, we involved 10 participants, and we encouraged them to think about becoming change makers across that week. And we worked with lots of different artists. We worked with museum curators, and we worked with an ecologist from SSE, who was really great insight into their career, because their job really is to go out to sites before sites take on big projects, such as kind of laying the pipe works for waterworks and oil, and looking at the natural environment around them and advising them about minimising this impact or redirection of sites and things like that. So the next slide. No. Oh, sorry. Next slide. Sorry. So this was great. It was a really tactile kind of sessions that we did. Day one was tours of the natural history collection, drawing and sketching in spaces. Day two was really working with ecologists to learn about their career and thinking about reducing climate change and becoming change makers themselves. They did things such as working with air drying clay to make their favourite animals, reusable tote bags, things like that. And then day three was based around, so in the background of this, Kim will speak about this in a minute, we had Art Night coming to Dundee, and one of the artists, Heather Phillipson, is really based around kind of creating videos and nature and things like that. So they were able to find out an awful lot about the way that she works as well. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. You can see here, this is some of the kids' final pieces of work for the Eco School. So part of the final output for them was to make their own mini art installation based on their own views of environmental change, interpreting the natural history collection. Next slide, please. We had a link with Art Night Dundee, so this was commissioned at roughly the same time as the Eco School. So it was piece was created during the spring/summer of 2023. Heather Phillipson is a sort of award-winning artist, and she used the natural history collections as inspiration for her film, and also she looked at BBC archive material, and this was installed up at the art school in Dundee. But part of our Eco School programme was that we had 2 curators coming in for the final day to talk about this work with the children, like what it meant to make a piece of work like this, what the artist had to do, how did she negotiate the access to the collections, and what inspired her. And this installation directly inspired their installations that they made. Part of the legacy for this piece is that it's now been part of the museum's permanent collection, so it's been the actual film's been accessioned into the collection. So that's been great for us to have that as part of the collection now. Next slide, please, Robin. Part of the programme for Wild Escapes was we held an event on World Earth Day. This was a family drop-in session, so we do a lot of these where we have the studio open, we have a range of materials available, and it's facilitated by our freelance artist team. So as well as the children's work from Eco School that was on display, families could contribute to a large-scale installation that was suspended from the ceiling of our studio, if you like. So we used recycled materials, which you can see in the picture here, a lot of recycled cardboard and recycled tissue paper. We had curatorial talks by our 2 curators, Mike and David, which was in the gallery space, so families could come to the studio, make something, move on to a different space and learn about the specimens themselves. This was free. We had 96 participants over 3 hours. So we were running about. We were just running about all day, but it was great. And it was a nice way to round off the Eco School session, because the kids who were involved in that came back with their families. They saw their work on display, and they got to also make a more collaborative piece of work with other families. So yeah, really nice session that day. Next slide, please, Robin.
Yeah, just to finish off on the World Earth Day, the other thing that we did across the Wild Escapes was that we themed the family space. For I think about 3-4 months, we themed the family space, and it was the first time we'd kind of worked with natural history curators, and we had an actual case of specimens in the family space as well. So people were able to come along and see this, and then view the natural history side of the museum as well. And we had lots of different, we themed it completely. We had lots of things about kind of biodegradable products and things like that as well. So there was lots of different types of drop-in learning that was accessible all the time in the family space for all to go and visit. So project outcomes, we were able to work alongside ecologists, artists. It was a great kind of selection of people that the kids got the opportunity of meeting and finding out about different career paths and things like that. We were able to really kind of develop our family space in new ways that we hadn't done before, work with the curators in new ways. We were able to develop new resources and gallery trails and really kind of celebrate the collection in a way we hadn't before. Children were given a real platform to develop their understanding and become change makers of climate change and things like that. And we embedded new ways of delivering. We were able to learn through delivery as a team and take these kind of ways of working forward.
Next slide, please, Robin. So we are aware this is maybe a quite dense PowerPoint, so I'm sure we can share it after this. I'm not going to go through all of the impacts. Part of the challenges we have is that we have to meet Dundee City Council strategy priorities, as well as Leisure and Culture Dundee's priorities as well. So part of the evaluation for this project was making sure that we're hitting all these targets. So the main one for us for this project was children and families improving physical, mental and emotional health for children and young people, and also improving health and wellbeing outcomes for children and young people who experience inequality. The impacts below, I'll go through a few of them. So they could explore lots of different art materials and techniques. We do have a feedback slide at the end, which you can read direct feedback from the children. One being what I think Elizabeth has said, I feel so free in here, and I get to try all these different materials which I don't get to use in school. So we're quite conscious of the informal learning element and the power of that. They could take risks in the studio. They could make something that didn't work, or it did work, or it wasn't what they thought it would be. They could teamwork together. They could learn about job roles in the world of work through working with SSE ecologists, and they also engage with the museum and culture services for the first time. Many of them hadn't been before, and if they had, it might have been, a handful of times, not for such a long, sustained project of like a week. Next slide, please.
So I suppose we're coming from it from a very organisational way, and so it is about having these big projects coming in from the side. Our added thing, and it wasn't a problem, it was a positive, was that we had art night as well. So there was lots of people involved. So it was kind of making sure we were going the right way to involve everybody and include and still make it a really accessible project for children to attend. So I think it was the admin for us and keeping on top of that, and also finding eco-friendly, again, organisationally, a lot of you will be the same. You've got to go through procurement. So it's really hard to go and kind of resource. So it was good for us to go and learn how to think sideways, and then again, be able to take that forward.
Yeah, we have a brilliant administrator, Jackie, who is our best friend after this project. Next slide, please. So this is just the final slide from the project. So this is just to let you guys read some of the direct feedback we had from parents, carers and young people involved. So we'll just leave that up for a few minutes, and we're happy to take any questions now if you would like.
I think the biggest thing for us was being able to develop as a team our kind of STEM learning, and watching children blossom and really develop their vocabulary around environmental issues and climate change across the week. but just to share the collection as well. We don't often get the chance to go and really spend a lot of time with the natural history collection. So we've embedded that going forward, and we have new offers and things around STEM learning.
I think as well, sometimes the collection can seem, it's like frozen in a moment in time. So this is a great chance to like reconnect it with like contemporary art practice and like what children think and what they want to do. It's trying to make it like applicable to them, which can be quite tricky. But this was a great chance to do that.
Yeah, it's also allowed us to develop a relationship with curators, because now when they're developing shows that are kind of linked to sustainability and climate change and things, we work hand in hand in a better way with them, and they take a lot of what learning teams say to embed into their exhibitions as well. So it's been a real positive.
Yeah, that's us.
That's us. Quick, real quick.
Stop sharing. Oh, thank you very much. It's like, a marathon, kind of presentation, but actually we heard everything very clearly. It was lovely to hear all of that, and great job, for both of you. Both, or the three presenters. I think it is so exciting to see how museums are developing, programs and shaping their thinking and priorities around and embedding all of this as part of, not just the organizational priorities, looking at the whole redevelopment, but also as part of STEM learning. I think, for me, when we're thinking about all of these things, we should also be thinking about the other side of, what is the museum function? How are we supporting what areas of curriculum, that we are doing for young people in terms of, what we have as museum resources to support teaching and learning of young people. So very, very pleased to hear about the biodiversity side of things, also to learn about, to hear about the link to STEM in all of that. And it's wonderful, but also looking at, global learning and education and learning and sustainability goals in terms of, human rights-based approach and, social justice. All of this we will be circulating later on. I think questions have been in, some people have been posing their questions. We could use, another 5 minutes on that, and some of them have been answered. I think there was one where do you get your funding from? And I think that question was, for the Dundee team, and it could apply to the St. Andrews. So Lucy has answered, a little bit there in terms of some of the money, comes from the Wild Escape funding that Art Fund.
Yeah, I think for that one it was like an art fund. It was an art funded project. So Art Fund is like an organisation in London,